What are they fear avoidant of? So that could be bending down. It could be, I don't like lift, every time I lift my arm up, it's a problem. That could be a sport. But we get it in there because those become what we're thinking about when we're programming where we want to get someone to experience. Whether you do it in a Peter O'Sullivan way and say, you don't like bend down 100 times, or you do it a little bit more creatively, how we're proposing, that would be clinical reasoning yourself. And at that point then, I will connect to the concept of load management. So everything up to this point has been neurophysiological, pain and change in processing. We use Scott Dye's envelope of function model. Have you heard of it? If you haven't heard of it, Scott Dye is a surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, come up with this concept of the tissue homeostasis pathophysiology of knee pain, was what the basis of his 2005 paper was based on, and we will draw it on here. So we'll draw a line. If I had my chalkboard here, I would do it with you, but we would draw a line something like this, and we would label these axes. So we'd say that this is something that you can do a really high load activity. We'll label it load. This one will say something you can do much more often, frequency. Everything that you are able to do comes somewhere underneath this line that we are drawing, which is this concept of envelope of function. Have you ever watched any endurance sports or anything when someone's really pushing the pace and you hear the commenters say they're pushing the envelope? That's the sort of question I'll ask someone to see if they've generally heard of that concept. Because then I will want to know what would be a high weight for you to lift. And I would get an example of whether it was being able to lift a staircase at home, or whether it was, you know, I train in the gym, I know I can do 92.5 for 10 reps for 3 sets, and whatever it may be that accurate, but you can draw on a high load activity, something you can do less, something you do more of, and lower load, cycling, running, walking, whatever it may be, labeling it on here. Then everything else, walking up the stairs, walking to work, driving to work, would be somewhere within here. To be able to then paint this idea of pitching things just outside the envelope of function, that would require you to in some way adapt. We would then ask, and I would give an example. So if you said 92 kilos and I didn't give you 92 kilo squat, I gave you 150, what would happen? I'll draw it way outside the envelope, illustrate the fact that it's way beyond our current capacity to be able to go right then. But would it be possible to ultimately get there? Get that buy-in for someone to say, how would you do it? Well, again, this envelope of function is something that's a dynamic model. It's not a thing. I can't get someone's envelope in this cup. It's a heuristic model that you only establish by doing it. There's no textbook that's going to tell me what your envelope of function is for bicep curling or for bending down. You only find out by doing it. But when you can get this idea that the envelope can shift with good programming, pitching just outside your current capacity, you can also get the fact that the envelope can go the other way. So then when you can bring the envelope down, and the envelope is now not up here, it's now here. We use an example of if you go into space, what happens? There's no gravity, so when you're out for 6 months and you come back, astronauts come back, they have to literally walk again, their body's adapted, our bodies are amazing things. Their envelope of function has reduced accordingly. You don't have to go into space to be able to say, so if you stop doing X, Y, and Z for a period of time, is your envelope of functional capacity for that thing expanded or shrunk? People generally can grasp the idea to be able to say, yeah, my envelope of function for that thing is pretty low. We will then use this to be able to explain. I'll use myself. I'm white and I'm Welsh, and arguably got a big or a small envelope of function for sun tolerance? Small. So I will use that to be able to explain that this envelope of function is a concept. If I was to suddenly, it's not been too hot for us since we've been here, but if I was to be here in the middle of the summer, it's 40 degrees, that would be analogous to this one that's way outside of envelope of function, frank injury, or I would burn. But could I grade my exposure to being able to do it over time? Probably. That then leads us into be able to explain the interesting post I was talking with Jace about. Is there any research to be able to say that conditioning the error actually reduces injuries? And it's an interesting question, and me and Paul were talking about it. It's an impossible study to create because you couldn't get two groups. One of them conditions the error over time, progressively loading in these awkward positions. The other group doesn't, and then make a situation where they suddenly step off and see who sprains their ankle and who doesn't. It's an impossible study. And if you put your head into and bury into any one component of anything that we've talked about so far, you would ultimately get to a point where it would be irrelevant. But what this concept of envelope of function leads us towards is the fact that we've introduced this idea of how tissues based on different metabolic rates adapt at different speeds. Connective tissue takes longer to adapt than muscle, and we can expose our connective tissue to load and it will adapt. We have an envelope of function for inversion. We have an envelope of function for valgus. We have an envelope of function for low back flexion that in the same way is trainable slowly over time. So we use that to be able to explain that a component of your training is going to involve awkward positions that if we want to be able to bend down again, we're going to have to build up your capacity to be able to bend down again. One component of the program. At this point, generally, people have been able to follow a lot of information because it's visual in a way that if I was to just talk it, it would just be all like, oh, what the hell's going on? In my experience, creating this and getting to this point has been the biggest difference between being able to actually get people into a position where I can help them or not. Because we can then be able to say, so we're in the right place. We want to be able to cross this metaphorical bridge that we call getting you to this side, which is to make you more robust. So this side of the model here would be typically chiropractic or physiotherapy or rehab. And most people can connect that they've been back and forward in this side and that they never really actually did all the things, taking care of the things that involve them being in control of the program. This side may be more ups and downs. This is the Toblerone effect that Louis Gifford would talk about. Some days we're going to be sore, we're going to have to poke things, but the general trend is that we're going to be getting more resilient and more robust, both psychologically and physically and socially, if we're engaging people in social prescription, or our programs are basically also addressing the social side of stuff. The point of our programs, though, is to be able to get you so that you don't need me, you don't need anybody else, you are able to self-manage. Unless you have a new complaint and you want to have our help. And I will say to people, if we can start you day one this side of that bridge, then we do. Because what we've got is a diagnosis, sensitized alarm system, and we've got this toolbox to be able to bring it down. On top of that toolbox is knowledge. I've already started it. Maybe this would be all the education someone naturally needs. Maybe someone else needs a little bit more to dispel some of their maladaptive beliefs that we maybe have addressed in the history. We use that Louis Gifford A, B, C, D, E, F, W to gather those. Underneath that, we've got exercise and movement. So we framed the idea that we're going to be using new movements. We framed the idea that we might be doing movements that's going to be relaxing, engaging things that they enjoy doing again, giving them permission to do so, maybe, and frame the fact that we could be loading awkward positions. Okay? Exercise and movement is what most people expect of us, but then we say we're also going to be pacing the things that we're boom and bust. We're going to be grading the exposure to the things that we're fearful of. And manual therapy is on that list. So manipulation is something that people will expect coming to us, but needling, massage, depending on what your background is what your manual toolbox helps you calm someone's system down. We only ever use it as a tool to get people to hear. If we don't have to, we don't. And a lot of my clients have never had any manipulation. I prefer not to do it if I can help it. Goal setting is the bottom one on this, so that's hit that box there. So then we will be able to paint this journey of sensitive to robust. They're not necessarily sensitive, but it's just what we call our programs. And as Paul said before, the logo is to illustrate that we won't necessarily have a straight line. Relationships, business, rehab programs are not straight lines of success. We will have ups and downs, and actually in the process is probably where the magic happens. But we can't do all this in one session. Any questions?